Hi, I'm Jamie. Welcome to my carport. We're going to make a boat. Before we can make a boat, though, we have to figure out a good way to take long sheets of plywood, 8 footers, and join them together so we can make a boat longer than 8 feet. So the joint we're going to use is a puzzle joint. And this is what they look like. These are just test pieces, of course. Ordinarily, they'd be 8 feet on each length, each side. They get dropped together like that. They're coated with epoxy, weighted down or clamped down, and now you have a long panel to work with. And what they look like when they're finished will be this. Nice and smooth all the way around. Just a beautiful panel in which to cut out parts. We're going to do that with a template, so I think we may as well get to it. But first, let me tell you what we're going to use. Nothing more than a 5-inch random orbital sander, something with which to drive screws, corded, uncorded, doesn't matter, and a router. Now in this case, I have a router. It's an inexpensive one too. It's from Harbor Freight. I've got a 1/2 inch by 1 1/4, I think, depth top bearing cutoff bit. That's what we're going to be using to cut this. I do have a little level, and I'll show you what that's for pretty soon. That's pretty simple, and just a roll of 120. All right, so let's get to it. Now, how we're going to do this is by a template, of course. And this is what they look like. And it's a pair, because they're a matched pair. One side will go to one piece of our stock, the other side to the other. We're going to route them, sand them, take these off, and our joint should fall right together. This little something I've been working on for a while, and it does a pretty darn nice job. It certainly saves you the expense of either buying a CNC machine, which are pretty expensive when you get into full-size sheets of wood, or getting lined up with someone who has one and then getting on their schedule and paying them to cut it. Especially if you're not sure what you're doing with your project, if you're going slow like I'm going to go. This is just a test piece. We're going to cut our pattern in each side of it, cut it in half so we can fit it together to show you the joint. If you are building a boat or anything you want, as it turns out, this is what on this particular piece of plywood, I call this the good side. This is the bad side, or the inside. So I'm going to assume in a boat situation, we're going to use this on the inside so that we have fewer piercings on the outer side. So we're going to move our Puzzle Pro over here, and I've dropped some screws in one of the many available holes. If I am going to just put two pieces together and put a paper template out and cut something out where I don't need the edge, you can just do it by hand or by eye. If I want to use one edge, the factory edge off this piece of plywood, as a base, so I have one long edge like for the chine of a boat, use that factory edge and straight edge, and make sure that your template is square with it. I've left about 1/4 inch over the edge. It's square there. Now I'm just going to tighten these down so that they're below the surface of the template. All right, this piece is ready to cut. Now what I'm going to do, rather than try to rig up a bunch of clamps, I've got enough space from my table, it's going to miss. I'm just going to weight that end down with the other side of this. so it doesn't want to walk away. And then we're going to cut this. Now, I've done this a few times. You're going to be working on a bench or even sawhorses. Feel free to clamp down either at these very corners or further back on your workpiece, just so it doesn't move around. I've done this a few times, so I'm just going to use this as my counterweight and cut this first side. I have taken my router bit so that my bearing is going to be riding fully on my metal template. But because we have standoffs on the metal of 5 millimeters thick, my bit will be able to cut through my entire thickness of the workpiece, and still I've got 5 millimeters of clearance, more or less, between the template itself. I've got a still somewhere, and I'll kind of insert that still in here so you see what I'm talking about. All right, here we go. Let's cut this first side. If you like sawdust, this is for you. Now I'm going to go and run that again just to make sure I didn't miss anything. All right, there we have it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap this around, get this one in place, and then cut it. What we'll do is I'm going to cut this in half, so now we have two matching pieces to form the joint. I've taken our templates off, and here's my test piece. I've got marks over here. This is where I'm my straight edge. This is going to be kind of the wild side. Now this is how we're going to start to fit this. Hopefully it'll only take one try, because you're going to be working with a thing on a bench. I'm going to work with it the same way. I ran the center of my sander down the empty spot so that the weight was supported by 2. And I did it on both sides. All I'm trying to do is get rid of this fuzz. It's going to be there no matter what. Let's do the other side. Okay. Now what I'm going to do here, because it's a test piece, I'm just going to run a line, cut it in half, so we can flop them and join them together. So I'm going to go and do that off camera. I cut this piece in part, so now we have two matching pieces. And let's see where our marks are. That's the factory edge, and that's the factory edge. Now, I haven't done anything else other than sand both faces. Let's see how close we get. A little tight. That's probably because of the fuzz, because there's still quite a bit floating around there. So here's, probably should have done it first, but here's my simple way. It takes a few minutes, but it's not particularly difficult. I've got some 120 rolled up, and all I'm going to do is run these edges. If I see anything sticking up, knock it off. Now I'm going to I've got it angled, so I'm almost creating like a micro bevel. Not by much. That was just the once over. Now let's see what she looks like. There we go. Now see, just finger pressure brings these level. I could probably do it again, but I'm not going to for this, because once we glue this up, we're going to put a lot of pressure on this joint to flatten it out. Now, most of you would probably just use either a good flat workbench, or even if you've got a smooth concrete floor, Put your Visqueen down, wet your edges, put on some thickened epoxy, assemble the joint, put it down, more Visqueen, put a board on it, and as much weight as you want. That is the nice thing about this joint. You cannot overpressurize it this way. Whereas a scarf, for example, if you put too much pressure, you can squeeze out more glue than you want, creating a dry joint. It doesn't happen a lot, but you can do it. This wants all the weight you can give it. All right, we're back with the 4-foot template. This guy is the fastest and easiest way to make a span of across 4 feet. It's obviously a little bit more unwieldy than the 2-foot version. But I'm going to show you what the joint looks like, so we're going to go ahead and cut one. All right, now we're going to flip around and do the other side, of course. So I'm not going to bother showing you all that. I think you get the idea. Let's just see what the face sanding and one quick hand fitting did for us. Ooh. Now these are tighter than I like. And the way to fix that, oops, there we go. The apexes are fine. It's light sanding on the flats will loosen the wedge up so the pieces slide together. But for, I would say that was pretty quick, considering it's 4 feet long. Now I'm gonna shift over real quick and show you my technique for sanding a lot of flats out as fast as I can. And that's just using a little file saw. Come on. Now, some people like it this tight. I kind of want a little more room for epoxy in there. So let's just stop and we'll be right back. Now, I got this little Wen file sander the other day. Wasn't sure I was going to need it or not. I bought it because 1, it was cheap, and 2, variable speed. So I've got a big rough edge on. Let's take that belt off. Slip on the 320, I think is what it is. Let's look for the arrows. Goes that way. Slips over. And by the way, they aren't super clear on the directions on this thing. Up inside the dust port is the button to tighten it. There we go. So let me plug her in. All I'm going to do is hit the flats. This won't take but a couple of minutes. Let's see how it goes together now. Get the apexes lined up. Okay. There's your 4-foot joint. Ready for glue up. Let's see what the, whoops. Let's see what the so-called outside looks like. Well, you know, I'd say that looks pretty darn good. perfectly acceptable puzzle joint. As you can imagine, if you're working on sawhorses and you've got a couple sheets lined up in a row, you could create these joints. You could certainly make a 30-foot by 4-foot panel in a day. I'm not sure what you'd use one for, especially in 5mm, but it could be the first layer of a multi-layered cold molded type hull, or whatever other project you may have in mind. All right, we're going to wrap this up. Okay, you've seen the puzzle joints, you've seen the templates. Now the question is why? I have made a very crude example of a scarf joint, and they're really simple. It's a beveled edge on 2 pieces of plywood. They go together, they're bonded up with epoxy, and they look beautiful. But there's a couple of problems. I'm not even sure I call them problems, but like everything, they have their own special situations. If, for example, we get this glued up and we misalign it so it's a little high, then I've got a big hump on both sides. Or if we put it in a clamp and it slips, now I've got a hollow in each side. Now, obviously, this is a narrow piece, but you can imagine in a 4-foot piece or a 2-foot piece, it could be a little trickier. The puzzle joint is self-aligning. It's not going to get out this way or that, and it certainly isn't going to go either way. Now, of course, the other thing is when you put this together, if you do it perfectly, and you put too much pressure on it, you can squeeze out too much glue and get a dry joint inside there. But it would be hard to know that because all you're going to see is a face and an edge. You'll notice extra glue, but how will you know if it's a dry joint? And although they're not particularly difficult to cut, you can cut them with, they make attachments for circular saws. You can create a sled with a jig with a router blade and go over it. There's a lot of ways to do it, and it's not a bad joint. In fact, it's a great joint that's been used for years. And if you're going to build a boat, you're going to use a scarf joint for solid timbers. For longitudinals, you'll absolutely use it. But they tend to be smaller. You can cut them on a table saw or a bandsaw, and they work out great. But for flat sheet goods, I like the puzzle for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the fact that it's not difficult to cut with a router and a template. And when it's put together, it doesn't care how much pressure you put on it. You won't squeeze glue out of here. You'll simply keep the 2 pieces in plane, which is what I want. If you put too much pressure on a scarf, you can create the dry joint. We don't want that. And of course, the reality is, with a scarf, let's say we have it all planned perfectly. Not that the glue's going to go bad, but without any glue, it isn't a joint at all. It doesn't hold together, period. This, even though there's no glue, if you put tension on this, it's not coming apart because of the wedge function of these fingers. They aren't a straight fit. They are a interference fit. So even if you missed a little glue, by the time you get it covered in glass, this guy is not coming apart. Plus, I think it's easier to cut. I don't have to be Da Vinci of the wood to make this joint. You have to kind of practice this, and I don't think it's as easy as people say. I've only cut one, and it was in terrible lumber. It wasn't difficult, but take, it took some time. Boy, this is a shitty prologue. Hopefully I can make something out of it. Boil it down. Scarf joint, even if it's perfectly made, if you take the glue away, it's not a joint. It's just two pieces of wood sitting together. The puzzle joint, even without glue, has a lot of natural strength because of the keyway effect of these fingers. It is a mechanical joint. And because we're cutting with a template, it's actually quite easy to cut. Everything takes some time. I like the joint, and if you like it, go and look at my templates. I sell them on eBay. I'll put a link down below. It's not for everybody, but it's the joint that I've chosen for boat building. My next episode is where we're going to start building a small canoe, somewhere around 16 or 17 feet. And we're going to utilize the puzzle joint to create the panels to make the boat. Now, about the template itself, it's super simple. It's 11 gauge plate. There's still plenty of room for when you get into this apex for your router base to miss any kind of clamping device, if you need one, back here. The standoffs are simple. Plywood and hardwood. Nothing to them. If you say, gosh, I'm getting a lot of marks on it, no problem. Get your little sander, put some 220, sand it a little bit, put some polyurethane on it, you're finished. Just don't get it on the business edge. This is the important edge here. Now, if you say, gosh, I've got some surface rust on that, again, not a problem. Take some 320, whatever, some fine grit paper, run the edges with your finger in the paper, and clean it. That's it. They are cut with a very close tolerance. So they aren't identical. These two pieces are not the same. Well, they kind of are the same, but there's a tolerance built between the two. I think you've seen they make a really nice puzzle joint, whether it's the 2 or the 4. And honestly, I think I'm gonna, when I have the next set cut, I'm gonna cut a 3-foot version to span the 2. We'll see how that works out. Anyway, the link is down below if you're interested in one. Thanks for watching. I know this was a longer video than I wanted to make, but it just kind of worked out that way. But I appreciate it, and good luck in your boat building adventures. And keep following my page as we move on beyond the puzzle joint into creating a small canoe. And then who knows what's after that. Thanks again.